My parents insisted I invite my sister, the one who slept with my ex, so I secretly brought the one person who could expose everything she hid. I used to think that blood was thicker than water, until I realized that some people will drown you in both, while expecting you to thank them for the experience. My name is Clarissa Morgan. I'm 29 years old and I've spent the last 5 years building my reputation as one of the most sought-after event planners in downtown Chicago. The irony isn't lost on me. I can orchestrate perfect celebrations for complete strangers. But when it came to planning my own wedding, my family turned it into a battlefield that would make Game of Thrones look like a peaceful Sunday brunch. It all started on a crisp Thursday evening in late July, 3 months before my wedding to Michael. We'd been together for 2 blissful years, and everything felt like it was falling into place with the satisfying precision I'd learned to appreciate in my professional life. Michael was everything I thought I wanted in a partner: financially stable as a marketing director, successful enough to make my parents beam with pride, and charming in that effortless way that made waitresses giggle and my mother actually compliment my choice in men for once in my life. We'd already booked the Fairmont Chicago for our October wedding, sent out elegant save-the-dates with our engagement photos, and I was drowning in a sea of fabric swatches, floral arrangements, and catering menus when my mother dropped the conversational bomb that would detonate my entire world. "Clarissa, honey, we need to have a serious discussion about the guest list," she announced during one of our weekly wedding planning sessions. My father sat rigidly beside her on their pristine white leather couch, his normally animated face wearing an expression I couldn't quite read. Something in their synchronized posture made my stomach drop like I'd just crested the highest hill on a roller coaster. "What about the guest list?" I asked cautiously, setting down my leather-bound notebook that was filled with meticulously organized seating charts and vendor contact information. "We think it's time you seriously considered inviting Vanessa," my mother said, her voice carefully measured in that particular tone she used when she was about to ask me to do something she knew I wouldn't want to do. "She is your sister, after all." The room fell into the kind of silence that feels heavy and oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of their antique grandfather clock and the distant hum of traffic from Lakeshore Drive. Vanessa, my older sister by exactly 2 years and 3 months, the golden child who could seemingly do no wrong in our parents' eyes, until she did everything catastrophically wrong in ways that still made my chest tighten with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. Vanessa had been the architect of my insecurities throughout our entire childhood, systematically undermining my confidence with the surgical precision of someone who knew exactly where to cut deepest. She was the sister who told me I was too fat for the dress I wanted to wear to junior prom, then showed up wearing the exact same dress in a smaller size. She was the one who convinced me that my high school boyfriend was cheating on me by showing me carefully edited text screenshots, causing me to break up with him only to watch her swoop in 2 days later claiming she was helping me heal. But her masterpiece of cruelty had come 3 years ago when I walked into my Lincoln Park apartment after what I thought was a surprise early return from a business trip, only to find her having enthusiastic sex with my then-boyfriend David in my own bed, using the spare key I'd given her for emergencies. The image of her smirking face when she saw me standing in the doorway still haunted my dreams sometimes. "Absolutely not," I said, my voice coming out sharper and more forceful than I'd intended. "You both know exactly what she did. You know precisely why we haven't spoken in 3 years. My father cleared his throat in that uncomfortable way he did when family drama threatened to disrupt his carefully ordered world. "That was a long time ago, Clarissa. People make mistakes. Adults learn to forgive and move forward with their lives." "Forgive and move forward?" I stood up abruptly, pacing toward their floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked their perfectly manicured garden, with its symmetrical rose bushes and imported Italian statuary. She deliberately seduced David, brought him to my apartment multiple times, and then made sure I would walk in on them having sex in my own bed. That wasn't a mistake. That was calculated psychological warfare. "She's changed significantly since then," my mother insisted, pulling out her iPhone to scroll through what I assumed was Vanessa's Instagram account. "Look at her social media presence. She's built this incredible influencer career with over 50,000 followers. She posts these beautiful, inspirational quotes about growth and forgiveness. She's been asking about you constantly." I turned around slowly, studying both of their faces with the analytical eye I developed from years of reading client reactions and managing family dynamics at other people's weddings. Something felt fundamentally wrong about this entire conversation. My parents had been absolutely furious with Vanessa after the David incident, had supported my decision to cut contact completely, and had even banned her from family gatherings for the first year afterward. Why now? I asked directly. What's changed that makes this suddenly so crucially important to both of you? My parents exchanged one of those loaded glances that spoke of private conversations and shared secrets I wasn't privy to. It was the same look they'd given each other when they'd told me they were refinancing the house, or when they'd explained why my college fund had mysteriously shrunk my senior year. Because family is family, my mother said finally, but her voice lacked the conviction she usually brought to her pronouncements about family values. And because people in our social circle will notice if she's conspicuously absent, you know how the community talks. That statement confirmed my suspicions that something was seriously wrong. My parents had never cared about community gossip before, had actually prided themselves on their independence from social expectations. When Vanessa's affair with David had become public knowledge in our overlapping social circles, they'd been the first ones to publicly cut contact with her, making it clear that they didn't tolerate that kind of behavior regardless of blood relations. Since when do you care what other people think? I pressed. You've always taught me that integrity matters more than appearances. We're just trying to keep the family together, my father said, but he couldn't meet my eyes when he said it. Over the following weeks, the pressure intensified with the persistence of water torture. Every single conversation with my parents somehow managed to circle back to Vanessa, like a broken GPS constantly recalculating the same route. They brought up carefully selected childhood memories that painted her in the most favorable light possible, reminded me of family traditions about forgiveness and second chances, and even orchestrated phone calls from my aunts and cousins who had obviously been coached on what to say to convince me. The most frustrating part was watching Michael slowly but inevitably side with my parents. At first, he'd been supportive of my position, understanding why I wouldn't want someone who had betrayed me so profoundly at our wedding. But as the family pressure mounted, I could see doubt creeping into his expressions. Maybe they have a valid point, he said one evening as we sat in our apartment reviewing please reply responses. It is your wedding day after all. Shouldn't it be about new beginnings and putting the past behind us? New beginnings, absolutely, I replied, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. But not about pretending that the past didn't happen or that actions don't have consequences. But I could see it in his eyes, the growing concern that maybe I was being unreasonable, maybe I was holding on to grudges too long, maybe I was the problem in this family dynamic. It was exactly the kind of doubt that Vanessa had always been masterful at cultivating in the people around me. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon when I discovered that my mother had been secretly communicating with Vanessa for weeks, sharing detailed information about my wedding plans. I found the extensive text message conversation completely by accident, when my mother asked me to respond to a vendor inquiry on her phone, while she was driving us to a cake tasting appointment. The conversation was lengthy, warm, and filled with insider details about my wedding that Vanessa had absolutely no right to know. They discussed everything from the color scheme to the menu choices to the guest list composition. It was like discovering that someone had been secretly filming my private life. How could you do this? I confronted my mother that same evening, my voice shaking with a combination of anger and betrayal. You've been planning behind my back, sharing my personal information with someone I explicitly told you I didn't want involved. We're trying to heal this family, she said, but her voice completely lacked the conviction I'd expect from someone who truly believed what she was saying. Vanessa genuinely wants to make amends with you. She's been asking about you constantly, expressing real regret about what happened. Then why hasn't she picked up the phone and called me directly? I demanded. Why hasn't she sent me a single message of apology in 3 years? Why is all of this going through you instead of coming to me personally? My mother fell silent, and in that silence, I knew with absolute certainty that Vanessa hadn't expressed any genuine remorse at all. This entire campaign wasn't about healing or forgiveness. It was about something else entirely, something my parents weren't telling me. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Michael slept soundly beside me, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind. I kept thinking about the timing of all this pressure, the way my parents' explanations kept shifting slightly with each conversation, the desperate edge I'd started hearing in their voices. So, I did what any successful event planner does when the details don't add up. I started investigating. I began with social media, creating a fake Instagram account so I could observe Vanessa's online presence without her knowing I was watching. Her account was indeed thriving, just as my mother had described. She had 53,000 followers and posted constantly about luxury lifestyle content, fashion collaborations, and inspirational messages about personal growth and overcoming obstacles. But as I scrolled deeper into her recent posts, I found something that made my blood run cold. Several posts from the past 2 months contained subtle but unmistakable references to exciting family events coming up and healing old wounds with people I love. She was clearly planning something, and it involved my wedding. I dug deeper, reaching out to mutual friends we still shared from college and high school. What I learned through careful, casual questioning made my stomach churn with a familiar mixture of anger and recognition. Vanessa hadn't just been asking about me. She'd been actively trying to gather intelligence about my wedding for months. She'd contacted my venue directly, claiming to be my sister and needing details for a surprise she was planning. She'd reached out to several of Michael's groomsmen on social media, fishing for information about bachelor party plans and wedding weekend logistics. She'd even tried to connect with some of my college friends, presumably to get herself invited as someone's +1 if she couldn't get a direct invitation. But the most shocking revelation came from a completely unexpected source. Elena Rodriguez, who had worked as my parents' housekeeper for 6 years before being suddenly dismissed 3 years ago, reached out to me through Facebook with a message that changed everything. "Clarissa, I heard through mutual friends about your upcoming wedding, and I'm so genuinely happy for you," her message read. "I also heard that your parents are pressuring you to invite Vanessa. I think you should know the real reason I lost my job with your family because it relates directly to what's happening now. We arranged to meet at a small, intimate cafe in Wicker Park, somewhere far enough from my parents' neighborhood that we wouldn't risk running into anyone who might report back to them." Elena looked older than I remembered, more tired around the eyes, but her warm smile was exactly the same as when she used to sneak me extra cookies when I was home from college. "Your parents didn't fire me because I accidentally broke your mother's expensive crystal vase, like they told you and everyone else," she began, stirring her coffee nervously with hands that shook slightly. "They fired me because I witnessed too much of what was really happening in that house, and I couldn't stay quiet about it anymore." My hands gripped my coffee cup so tightly I was surprised it didn't shatter. "What do you mean?" "I knew about Vanessa and David long before you discovered them together," she said, her voice heavy with 3 years of carried secrets. "I saw them together in your parents' house multiple times when you were at work. They would use your parents' guest room thinking nobody would know because your parents were usually out during the day." The cafe suddenly felt too hot, too crowded, too loud. "You saw them at my parents' house?" "At least 6 different times over 2 months. And when I finally couldn't stand it anymore and told your mother what I'd witnessed, she begged me not to tell you. She said it would work itself out naturally, that Vanessa would come to her senses and end it before anyone got hurt." Elena's voice grew bitter. "But it didn't stop, it escalated. And when you finally discovered them, I thought surely your parents would be grateful that I'd tried to protect you by speaking up. But they weren't grateful. They fired me 2 weeks later, claiming I knew too much about the family's private business and that my discretion couldn't be trusted. They gave me 2 weeks severance pay and a reference that was so lukewarm it took me 4 months to find another job. I felt like I was going to be sick. Why are you telling me this now?" Elena looked me straight in the eye with an intensity that reminded me why I'd always trusted her. "Because Vanessa has been calling your parents regularly for months. She needs something from them, from this family connection, and they're terrified of what she'll do if she doesn't get it. I don't know exactly what kind of leverage she has over them, but it's significant enough to make them willing to sacrifice your happiness and peace of mind for hers." Again, that night, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. If my parents wanted to invite someone who knew all the family secrets to my wedding, then I would invite someone who knew all the family secrets to my wedding, but it wouldn't be Vanessa. I called Elena the next morning. "I have a proposition for you," I said without preamble. "How would you like to come to my wedding as my personal guest?" The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Clarissa, I don't think that's a wise idea. Your parents would be furious, and I don't want to cause problems for you on your wedding day." My parents wanted someone who knows our family history intimately to be present at my wedding, I said, feeling a steel resolve settle into my voice that I'd never heard before. You certainly qualify for that description. Besides, I think it's past time that some long-buried truths came to light. Elena was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically hear her weighing the potential consequences. Are you absolutely certain about this? Once this happens, there's no going back. I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life. The wedding day arrived with the kind of perfect October weather that event planners dream about. Crisp but not cold, sunny but not harsh, with just enough of a breeze to make everything feel fresh and alive. The Fairmont Chicago looked exactly as I'd envisioned it during all those planning sessions. Elegant and warm and sophisticated, with fall foliage arrangements that complemented the venue's classic architecture perfectly. Michael looked devastatingly handsome in his custom-tailored tuxedo, and for a brief shining moment as I saw him waiting for me at the altar, I almost forgot about all the family drama brewing beneath the surface of our perfect day. This was what I dreamed of, what I'd worked so hard to create, a celebration of love and commitment surrounded by people who genuinely cared about our happiness. But then, 20 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I saw Vanessa. She glided into the venue like she was walking a red carpet, wearing a dress that was precisely one shade too close to white and definitely too attention-grabbing for someone who wasn't the bride. Her Instagram-perfect hair and makeup were flawless in that way that spoke of professional styling and ring lights, and she carried herself with the practiced confidence of someone who believed they were the star of every show they attended. "Clarissa!" she exclaimed, approaching me with arms outstretched in a gesture that would photograph beautifully for her social media content. "Oh my God, you look absolutely stunning. I'm so incredibly happy that Mom and Dad finally came to their senses about inviting me to share this special day with you." I stepped back deliberately before she could embrace me, maintaining the distance I'd worked so hard to establish. "I didn't invite you, Vanessa." Her perfectly practiced smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. "Well, no, of course not directly, but we're family. Family forgives and forgets and supports each other through life's biggest moments, right?" She glanced around the venue with the calculating eye of someone mentally composing Instagram captions and identifying the best photo opportunities. "Some things can't be forgotten," I said quietly, but with enough steel in my voice that she couldn't mistake my meaning. Before Vanessa could formulate her response, I saw Elena enter the venue through the main doors. She looked absolutely beautiful in the elegant navy blue dress I'd helped her select, a sophisticated choice that complemented her skin tone perfectly and made her look like she belonged among the other distinguished guests. Several people turned to look at her with polite curiosity, clearly recognizing that she wasn't someone they knew but assuming she must be important to be there. My parents rushed over immediately, my mother's face draining of color so quickly I thought she might faint. "Clarissa, what is she doing here?" my father whispered urgently, his voice tight with panic. "She's my invited guest," I said clearly, loud enough for several nearby guests to hear. "You told me I should invite someone who knows our family intimately. Elena knows us very well indeed." Vanessa's eyes narrowed dangerously as she spotted Elena across the room. Something passed between them. A look of mutual recognition and barely concealed hostility that confirmed everything Elena had told me was absolutely true. The wedding ceremony proceeded without any obvious incidents, though I could feel waves of tension radiating from my parents' section throughout the entire service. Michael and I exchanged vows that felt more meaningful and authentic than I'd expected, knowing that we were starting our marriage with complete honesty between us. He'd finally understood why I'd been so adamant about not wanting Vanessa there after I'd shared Elena's revelations with him the night before. But the real fireworks were reserved for the reception. Elena had strategically positioned herself at a table where she had clear sightlines to the entire room, and I watched her watching Vanessa throughout the cocktail hour and dinner service. Vanessa, meanwhile, was working the reception like the social media professional she'd become, taking selfies with relatives, posting Instagram stories in real time with captions about family healing and new beginnings, and generally treating my wedding like content for her personal brand. Everything seemed to be proceeding smoothly until the speeches began. My father had just finished his carefully prepared toast about love and commitment and the importance of family support when Vanessa stood up uninvited, champagne glass in hand, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "I'd like to say something, if I may," she announced, her voice carrying across the room with the practiced projection she'd developed for her video content. "I know there's been some unfortunate tension between Clarissa and me over the past few years, but I think today is absolutely the perfect day to put all of that ancient history behind us once and for all." The entire room fell into an uncomfortable silence. This wasn't part of the carefully planned program, and everyone could sense the undercurrent of family drama crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. "I want everyone here to know how incredibly proud I am of my little sister," Vanessa continued, her voice taking on the saccharine tone she used in her inspirational Instagram videos. "She's always been so wonderfully forgiving, even when people make terrible mistakes that hurt her. She has this amazing ability to find it in her heart to move past things that would destroy other people." I stood up slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Vanessa, please sit down." "Oh, but I'm not finished sharing yet," she said, her smile taking on a sharp edge that her followers never got to see. "I think everyone should really understand what kind of extraordinary person Clarissa is. The kind of woman who holds grudges over ancient history. The kind of sister who can't find it in her heart to forgive a simple mistake between a sister and an ex-boyfriend who didn't even matter in the long run anyway." The room was completely silent now, the kind of silence that feels thick and suffocating. I could see Michael's jaw clench, could see my parents looking absolutely mortified, could feel the eyes of every single guest fixed on our family's dirty laundry being aired in public. But before I could formulate any response, Elena stood up with a dignity and composure that commanded immediate attention. "You're absolutely right, Vanessa," Elena said, her voice calm but carrying clearly across the entire room. "Everyone should know exactly what kind of person Clarissa is, and what kind of person you are." Vanessa's face went white beneath her carefully applied makeup. "I'm sorry, but who exactly are you?" "I'm Elena Rodriguez. I worked for the Morgan family for 6 years, before I was terminated for knowing too much about their private business. I was there the day you brought David to your parents' house while Clarissa was at work. I was there for all the days you brought him there, actually. 6 different occasions over the course of 2 months." Audible gasps rippled through the audience like waves. Vanessa's champagne glass began trembling visibly in her manicured hand. "I was also there when you called David that final day and told him exactly when Clarissa would be coming home early from her business trip," Elena continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each word. "When you made absolutely certain that she would walk in on you together. It wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness, was it, Vanessa? It was carefully planned and deliberately executed. That's completely..." Vanessa stammered, but Elena wasn't finished. "I tried to tell Mr. and Mrs. Morgan what I'd witnessed, hoping they could intervene before Clarissa got hurt. Instead, they fired me and swore me to secrecy because they were more concerned about protecting the daughter who was deliberately devastating their other daughter. My mother was crying openly now, my father looked like he wanted to disappear entirely, and the whole room was transfixed by our family's dysfunction playing out like a reality television show. And now," Elena said, looking directly at my parents with an expression of profound disappointment, "they're enabling her again. Because Vanessa has been blackmailing them for months, threatening to expose their financial problems, and your father's gambling debts on her social media platforms if they didn't force Clarissa to include her in this wedding. Because she needs this family connection for her influencer brand, and she's been systematically manipulating them to get it." The silence that followed was so complete it felt like the entire world had stopped breathing. Vanessa's carefully constructed public persona crumbled completely in real time. "You have absolutely no proof of any of those accusations," she said, but her voice was shaking so badly she could barely get the words out. Elena calmly pulled out her smartphone. "Actually, I have extensive proof. You've been texting me for months, trying to get information about Clarissa's personal life. You offered to pay me to spy on her wedding preparations. You sent me screenshots of threatening messages you sent to your parents. I kept every single communication." The aftermath was swift and decisive. Vanessa fled the reception in tears, her perfect image shattered in front of dozens of witnesses who would undoubtedly spread the story throughout our social circles. Several guests were already discreetly taking notes on their phones, not for gossip, but because they recognized they'd witnessed something significant about family dynamics and manipulation. My parents spent the remainder of the evening in a series of private conversations, finally admitting to the months of financial pressure Vanessa had been applying and their terror that she would destroy their reputation in the community by exposing their private struggles on her popular social media platforms. Michael found me later on the hotel's terrace, looking out at the Chicago skyline twinkling in the darkness. "I owe you a profound apology," he said simply, taking my hand in both of his. "I should have trusted your judgment from the very beginning. I should have known that you had excellent reasons for the boundaries you'd established." "You couldn't have known the full extent of what was happening," I replied, squeezing his fingers. I didn't even understand how deep the manipulation went until Elena explained it all. "What happens now with your family?" I thought carefully about his question, watching the city lights blur and shift in the distance. "Now we start completely fresh. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas, no more tolerating people who don't respect us simply because they share our DNA." The morning after our wedding, I received a lengthy text message from Vanessa. It was rambling and defensive, full of non-apologies and attempts to reframe the situation as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. I read it once, screenshot it for my records, then deleted it and blocked her number permanently. I also blocked her on every social media platform and made sure Michael did the same. Elena and I developed a genuine friendship in the months that followed. I helped her find a new position with a family who appreciated her discretion, integrity, and loyalty. She often jokes that she finally got to give my parents her real 2 weeks' notice, 3 years late but ultimately satisfying. My relationship with my parents required extensive rebuilding with clearly defined boundaries and expectations. They entered financial counseling to address the debt issues that had made them vulnerable to Vanessa's manipulation, and they learned to recognize and resist her tactics of emotional blackmail. It wasn't an easy process, and it took almost a year of family therapy sessions, but we eventually found our way back to each other. As for Vanessa, her influencer career never recovered from the whispers and speculation that began circulating after my wedding. When people started questioning the authenticity of her perfect family relationships content and demanding more transparency about her personal life, her follower count began a steady decline. She eventually moved to Portland, claiming she wanted a fresh start in a new creative environment. But everyone understood she was fleeing the reputation she'd earned in Chicago. Michael and I celebrated our first wedding anniversary at the same Fairmont Chicago venue where we'd been married. As we danced to the same song that had played at our reception, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed in just 12 months. "Do you ever regret how everything unfolded that day?" he asked me as we swayed together under the same chandeliers where my old life had ended and my new one had begun. I considered his question seriously, thinking about all the pain and drama that could have been avoided if I'd simply capitulated to family pressure. "I regret that it had to happen so publicly," I said finally, "but I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret refusing to pretend that abuse disguised as love is acceptable just because it comes from family members." "What's the most important lesson you learned from this whole experience?" I smiled, thinking of Elena's courage in speaking truth to power, of Michael's growth in learning to trust my judgment completely, of my parents' journey toward genuine honesty, and of my own evolution from chronic people-pleaser to someone with unshakable personal boundaries. "I learned that real family isn't determined by genetics or legal obligations," I said. "It's about people who choose to show up for you when it matters most, who celebrate your happiness instead of trying to diminish it for their own benefit. It's about surrounding yourself with people who build you up, rather than systematically tearing you down to make themselves feel more powerful." As we continued dancing in the same ballroom where the most important confrontation of my life had taken place, I realized that sometimes the most meaningful celebrations aren't the ones that proceed according to carefully laid plans. Sometimes they're the ones that strip away all the pretense and facade, leaving you with only the people who genuinely matter and the strength to protect what you've built together. I never did get that picture-perfect family wedding I dreamed about as a little girl, complete with loving relatives and heartwarming speeches about unconditional family bonds. Instead, I got something infinitely more valuable: a marriage built on complete honesty and mutual respect, friendships forged through loyalty and tested by adversity, and the hard-won knowledge that I'll never again sacrifice my peace of mind or emotional well-being for someone else's comfort or convenience. And honestly, that trade-off is worth more than all the perfect family photographs and inspirational social media content in the world.